Well, I'm going to go ahead and just get started. Like I said, I've got a couple of folks that emailed me that might be late or whatnot. But for the sake of those of us who are here, let's go ahead and get started. Now, what I want to do first, and I'm going to ask you to leave your microphones open, not muted. Let's try a couple of things and see if you all can walk me through a couple of processes. So first, I'm going to share my screen. I think for now we're going to put away that huge data set. I've got a smaller version of it, which is a bit more manageable and easier to see on the screen. So let me jump over to that and let's try a few things out. As a little refresher from what we did yesterday. All right, so you should be seeing something called data sample small at this point.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's good so far. Okay, let me just tuck that away. All right, so let's try a couple of things. So I've stripped this small version here. I've taken away all the formulas. I've taken away all the named ranges, everything. So we've got what do we have here? Actually, 18 students of data. So this is more akin to what you might find in a classroom. And the nice thing is we can actually see the whole thing on one screen. So that's good too. So let's walk through. First, one thing we want to find out is how many students we have in second grade and how many students we have in third grade. So what is my starting point? What do I do first?
Set a range.
Yeah,
or
let's name our ranges.
set up a range.
Yeah, that way we don't have to say from, B2 to B19. You have to keep repeating that or keep selecting them. Let's just name them. All right, so if we're going to be looking at the number of students in second grade versus third grade, which range or which cells here should we name?
The student grades.
Yeah, student grades, sure enough. So let me go ahead and I will select that. And then what do I do? I've got them selected. Now what?
Click data up on top.
Okay.
Data, and then name. What was it?
Named ranges.
Oh, name ranges.
Yep. Because we have a range of cells and we want to give it a name. So I'm going to go ahead and just give it student grades. I type it over there on the right hand side and done. So now we've got a range called student grades. All right. So if I click on it, you see it selects that. All right. What do I do next? Remember, we're trying to get to how many second graders and how many third graders. So what formula can I use to count the number of
Here it is.
third?
What formula can you count?
Okay,
Count A?
Now count A is going to say count all.
Okay, you
I don't want to
specific.
count all. Yeah.
If then?
Almost. So I want to count them. Let's say I only want second graders, so I only want to count them if they're a second grader.
If.
Sort, maybe sort first.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Sort first. Or does it matter?
No, it doesn't matter actually.
Well, do we need their valid scores?
We will soon. We will soon.
Soon.
So right now, I want to
Okay.
count them if they are a second grader, right? I want to count the number of grades that if they are second grade, right? So it is going to be a count, and I'll put it over here on page 2. How many second grade students? So it is going to be a count, and then what after that? Count them if they're a second grade.
If.
Yep, count if.
Range, we got to put the range.
And we
Count
get-
if range. We got to put the range in there.
And what did we
The
call the
second
range?
grade.
Student grades. Student grades.
Yep, and then a comma, and then since I only want second graders,
2.
that's it, exactly.
Uh-huh.
We have 13.00 second grade students. Let's automate a little bit. So let's say grade, and we've got second grade, we've got third grade, and now we want the number of students. So we're going to use that same formula, equals count if. The range is still going to be student grades, but what can I put here instead of the number?
Let's see.
Click on the cell. Just click on the cell.
That's right. We'll just click right there on F5. So whatever value is in there, that's what we're looking for, right? It should be 13 again. Sure enough. And then I want to know how many third graders there are. So I could rewrite. Yeah, right. I could just rewrite it, or I can select and fill down. And that immediately gives me the number of students per grade. And I'm going to center those. All right, let's find out what is their average score. Now, walk me through it. What do I need to do to find their average score?
Equals average. And then we have to have the range or the list of cells that we want to average.
So I could type in the actual
Average
cell
if.
references. Yeah, it's going to be if.
Average if. And then student grades.
Well, we're looking for their scores, not their how much gain they made, or what their average score is. We have 2 options here.
The less than, greater than sign.
We're going to use that in a moment. Not yet.
Oh, average. Okay.
Yep. So let's think about something.
Average.
So, well, we know if I go back over here, we know that we've got a named range for their grades, right? What grade they're in. But if you look over here on gains, that's what we're trying to find out. How much gain do they make? It's blank right now. There are no gains. So we need to do that first, right? Before we can figure out the average gains, what's the gain? So how can I do this? I've got score 1 time 1, score 2 time 2, and gain. So what can I put here to calculate how much gain they made from the first to the second score?
Subtract score 2 or score 2 and time score 1.
Okay, so subtract score number 2 from score number 1. Let's try it.
Or the other way around, subtract score 1 from score 2.
Subtract score 1 from score 2. So
anyway, score 2 minus score 1. Maybe I'm
Okay.
understanding it differently.
There we go. Huh. Oh, look, Google Sheets actually said suggested autofill because it knows that there's already cells next to it. And let's go ahead and do it. Click. So now we have all of their gains. And student 1 actually went backwards a little bit, and this one down here went backwards a little bit, but most of them went up. Okay. So now we have a set of cells that have the gains. So whenever we refer to the gains that they have made, we could type in cell I2 through I19, or we could simply give it a name, right? Which will make it a lot easier to write the formulas. So I'm going to go ahead and select it. Now, where do I go to give it a name?
Data,
Mm-hmm.
named ranges.
Okay, and what do you want to call it?
Just gains or?
Okay, sure, done.
Yeah.
So now whenever we're referring to gains, it's always going to be that in those cells right there. All right, so now we've got their gains. Now we can get back to our original question, which is, what's the average, actually not average score, let's get the average gain by second graders. So we know it's got to be average if. We did that before. All right, so now what's the criterion range? What are we looking to check to see if we include it?
Gains.
Well, we want second graders only, right? So where are we going to look to determine whether or not to include the students?
Student grades.
Yes.
Comma 2.
Or instead of 2, I could simply click over there on the 2. I could just type in 2, in which case when I go to the next one down for third grade, I'll have to type in 3 also. But we've already got our our 2 and 3 over here. One of my sort of operating principles with using spreadsheets is if you've already got the number somewhere, just keep reusing it. Instead of trying to type it in every time, just use it again, right? We've already got it. So it's over there. All right, so we've got, where are we looking for the criterion? That's student grades. We've got the criterion. We're looking for whatever's over there in F5, which is a 2. And the next thing is going to be, what are we going to average, right? So where is the information? Where are the values that we're going to average?
In the gains.
Exactly. Oh, and we got, because I cannot type. There we go. And now I can just simply fill it down. Because this one right here is going to look over here at the 2, right? And since I've moved the formula down 1, then the place it's going to look is also moved down 1 to 3. So if you see this first one, it's looking at F5, but then I move the formula down, so the next one is looking at F6, which is the 3. And by doing it this way, I don't have to retype anything, which brings me joy. So there's our average gain. Just for cleanup, 15.15384615 is a bit too much. So I'm going to apply something here that we did yesterday. Do you remember how we rounded a value? So let's say we've got equals 22 divided by 7, which is an approximate equivalency to the value of pi, right? 22/7 is about pi, is 3.14. Well, 3.14, blah, 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 blah. Too many. So if I want to take this and say, you know what, I don't want all those decimal points, just give me 1 decimal point. I can add to this. I can turn this into a more comprehensive formula and say round.
Okay.
And then what am I going to round? 22/7. And then with a comma, it says, all right, how many decimal points do I want? Let's just say 1. All right. 3.1. I can do the same thing up here. This whole formula gives me that crazy long number, right? So let's just put that inside of the rounding formula. Round all of that to 1 decimal point. 15.2. So I copied the formula down to the next one. See, it says round, but that only had 1 decimal point anyway. All right, so now we have figured out how many students there are in each grade and the average gain of those students, lickety split. So let's turn back to this short data page. All right, so now I want to figure out what scores are valid. And this is where we're going to use that if then. So let's say anybody who takes less than 25 minutes, we're going to call that a non-valid score. All right. So we have, and let's just look at time 2 right here. So we're going to look at these values right here. And let me just highlight them so we know which ones we're talking about. Let's get a nice pretty color. There we go. So time 2. I want every score or every gain where the students took less than 25 minutes. I want to call that an invalid score. So I only want to look at the kids that took more than 25 minutes. Okay. How will I do that?
The if then.
Right. We're going to use our if then. And I'm going to put a little, I'm going to just do a little formatting something here just to make it easier on us. I'm going to add another column for valid scores. All right. So it's going to be if. We know that. All right. So what am I looking at? If what?
If time 2.
So this value over here,
or that
right?
cell. Yeah.
Okay. Let's mark the ones that are valid. So I'm looking for anything that's greater than 25. So if H2, which is 70, is
greater than
sign.
Yep. Greater than, there's my 25 if it's greater than 25. So that's what we're going to look for, right? That's our test. All right, comma. What are we going to put there if it's true?
1.
We could put a 1. We could put a numerical value there, certainly. But you know what? Let's just put the word valid in there. If it's valid, let's just say valid, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we can put the word in there. Now, whenever you want to put text, words, into a formula, you have to let Google Sheets or Excel know this is not a number, it's a word. And the way we do that is we put it in double quotation marks. So valid. So if H2 is greater than 25, that's our check, right? If that's true, then put the word valid. And if it's not true, let's just leave it blank. Okay. So we're only going to be marking the ones that are valid. Now, do you remember how we put a blank in there? I'll give you a hint. It's like text, but with nothing in it.
Oh, just a space.
It won't take a space, unfortunately.
Zero.
Let's see.
So it's text. And anytime we put text into a formula, we have to put quotation marks around it, right? But this text is going to have nothing in it. So what do we put here?
Quotations with quotation, blank
Double quotation.
You don't even need the blank. We could put a blank, but a blank is actually text also, right? We don't want anything in there at all. So quotation, quotation. Just no space or anything in between them.
Okay.
Yep. Empty, completely empty. And it's saying suggested autofill. Now let's do it. Let's do it the other way. So I'm going to drag down. And then what's my command to fill down? Do you remember that? It's a keyboard command. If I want to fill down.
Oh, control down arrow.
Control, not down arrow, but control down arrow will jump to the bottom.
Okay.
D for down.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, control D. D for down.
Mm.
So right away, it's now marked everybody whose test took more than 25 minutes. So now we know which ones are valid. So let's just double check it. So here we've got an 11 minutes. Nope, that's not marked valid. We've got a 6 minutes. Nope. 19, 13. Nope. So sure enough, it found all of the students that took more than 25 minutes. So let's do something interesting here. Let's actually put how much time we're requiring of students. And instead of the word valid up there, I'm going to just say 25 minutes or 25, okay? So currently what we have done is we've actually written in that 25. But what if we change our mind later and we think, you know what, maybe it should be 24 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes, right? We would have to go back and change the formula, copy it down, and have it recalculate basically, right? Let's simplify it. After all, we're using a spreadsheet. Let's have the spreadsheet do all the work. So instead of that, instead of putting this number in here, let's just have it use whatever value we put up here in I1, which currently is 25, right? So instead of actually putting the number in there, why don't we just put that one number one time somewhere else and then just keep referring back to it? So right now it's the same, but the difference is, let's say we change it to 90. Suddenly, this first one is no longer valid because it's greater than that. We say, you know what, that's too much. Let's call it 30 minutes. And it's going to recalculate for me. So I have changed, because that's the operating principle. Put the number in one time and then just keep referring back to it. I would much rather have a single cell with a number in it than have to put that number, manually put that number in every formula. Just put it in one place and say, just go look there. And whatever number that is, that's what we're going to use. And in fact, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I have over here my results page, I've got a cell called minimum time. Let's put that number in there, right? The minimum time that we will allow, 25. And even better, let's give it a name. So instead of saying, go look at the results page and go find B1 and use that number, we could just give it a name. But let's leave it alone for now and see what happens, because something very strange is going to happen. So right now, if H2, which is 70, is greater than, and I'm going to go over here and just click on it, greater than that, then call it valid. Okay, I just put it in one place on a different sheet and I said, go look there, right? Whatever's there, that's the number that we're using. But I already know that's going to create a problem. And here's what let's try it though. Okay, so we've changed it, right? We said, go look at the other page, cell B1, whatever's there, that's what we're checking. So the time has to be greater than whatever's in that other cell over there. Let's copy this down and see what happens. And I will already tell you it's going to fail. But let's see. Suddenly they're all valid. Well, that's not right. Because we're looking for 25, yeah? We said the minimum time has got to be at least 25. Well, suddenly 6 is valid, and 19 and 13 are valid. Something's gone screwy on us. And here we get to talk about two different kinds of references. Now you remember when we did the gains over here, it basically said look back over at E and look back over at G2 and subtract, right? We copied it down and the place it's looking also moved down, right? So now we're at E3 and G3 and we copied it down and now it's E4 and G4. So whenever we move the formula, the place it's looking also changed, which is appropriate here. It works here, okay? But the problem is the number we want is always in B1. No matter where we put the formula, we can move the formula down. We don't want it to look further down the list. We still want it to look there. There's something called a relative reference and an absolute reference. And let me see if I can demonstrate. This is actually, if you took the little the form at the beginning yesterday, I said, do you know what absolute references are? And most people kind of went, no idea. But it becomes really important because if we're going to move this formula down the list here, we have to make sure it's always looking at the exact same place, no matter where we put the formula. Let me show you. New share. Let me pull up my Photoshop again. All right, so let's say we've got brush. So we've got A, B, C, D, and E. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so let's say we have our formula here. And over here on F1 is the value that we want to look at, right? So when we say, this is our formula, formula with a relative reference. What we're telling the formula is look over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And whatever's over there, use that value. Well, if we move this formula down to the next one, so here we just move the formula, well, it's still going to look over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but there's nothing there. And if we move it down again, formula, or with a relative placement, it's going to look over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there's nothing there. We want it to keep looking at that one, right? No matter where we move the formula, we want to always look at that cell right there. So the difference between relative and absolute, and let me just get rid of all this. I got rid of too much. With a relative reference, it's going to look at a relative position, like go over this many cells and up that many cells. If it's an absolute reference, it's going to say always look in the exact same place. So if we have our formula here with an absolute and it's referring to this number over here, if we move that formula down, let's say we put it over there, okay, and we put our formula with the absolute reference, it's still going to look at the same place. So what we have to tell Google Sheets is we need to take that reference to that cell. Don't move it around, but always look in the exact same place. And it turns out it's really simple to do, fortunately. Let me get a different color. So if we said the first time, look at the cell B1, and that was our time, right? We wanted to always look at B1. So if we want to say always, no matter what, look in the same place, we have to change that to read always in B, and the $ means always. Always B, always 1. So no matter where we move the formula, it's always going to look in column B, and it's always going to look in row 1. Well, fortunately, we don't have to actually type in those $. Google Sheets will do it for us, which makes it so much easier. So let's take a look at Google Sheets and let's see how it changes. So let me just pop back over to my small set. Okay. And just for example, you can see here, this one's G3 minus E3, no dollar signs, which means if we move the formula, it's going to move the cells it's looking at, right? But we can change those. We can change them to an absolute. And so here we have look in results B1, right? And we want it to always be B1. So we could type $B, $1, or with our cursor there, you can simply hit the F4 key on your keyboard and it will automatically put those dollar signs in there for you. Now, are either of you on Macs or are you all on PCs?
PCs.
Okay, yay. All right. In that case, it's F4 key. If you were a Mac, it's actually command function will do that. So what this is saying now is take a look at H2 and compare it always against B1. No matter where we put this formula, we always want B1. Now you'll notice that H2 right there doesn't have the dollar signs, which means if we move the formula, that's going to change also. But here we wanted that to happen because when we go down to the next one, we want it to be H3 because it's going to compare the next one down. And the next one is going to look at H4. So we move the formula down the rows. So it's also going to look farther down the rows. It's relative to the position. In this case, what that means is always go one to the left and get that value, okay? So we want that one to change as we copy the formula down, but we don't want that B3 to change or B1 to change. And that's why we had to make it an absolute. So absolutely always go look at that place right there. And it's the dollar signs that say it's an absolute reference. So originally we had B1. I just simply hit my F4 key and it turns it into an absolute reference. Now, have I confused anybody?
No.
So relative, like from here, here's where you go, this many over, this many up, down. Absolute, always the same one, right? Okay, so now our valid has, the first one has that absolute reference in it, right there. $B, $1. Now let's copy that one down and see if we can fix this problem over here. Sure enough. Now we've got the right ones indicated. So let's see. So this one, the first one looks at B1. The next one looks at B1 on the other sheet. The next one looks at B1. The next one looks at B1 and all the way down. No matter where we put that formula, it's still looking at the results page, cell B1. Now here's where that becomes useful. Like I said, we only want to put a number in one time. So we're going to put it somewhere in the spreadsheet and say, just go look over there. And we gave it an absolute reference, so it always goes to the same place. So here's where it becomes interesting. Let's say, based on more test scores and stuff like that, we decide, you know what, 25 minutes is not the right time. It really ought to be 40 minutes. Well, let's say 30 minutes. Okay, they've got to have at least 30 minutes, which means this 26 is going to be invalidated and that 26 will be invalidated also because we're going to change it. Because we used that absolute reference, we just have to change that one number because everything is looking at that same number. So let's go back to the results. Instead of min time 25, we can change it one time here and it should update all of these. Sure enough, 26 is no longer valid. 26 and 23 are no longer valid. right? So we only put it in one place and we just keep referring back to it. It makes it much, much easier. Or let's see, what do we got? We got a 35, which is valid. Let's say we change it to 40 over here. Suddenly that 35 is no longer valid. See, there's always a hard way and an easy way to do things. Or a hard way, an intermediate way, and efficient, easy way to do it. And I'm always looking for the efficient, easy ways to do it. I'll tell you, in my experience, there's nobody who works so hard as the person who's lazy. The lazy person works harder than anybody else because he's always thinking, there's got to be a simpler way to do this, right? And I'm one of those people. I want the easiest way possible. It turns out there's even an easier way to do this. Anybody want to take a stab at what that might be? And I'll give you a hint. We're going to change something over here.
No idea.
And I think somebody said it earlier, actually. We could just give that cell a name, right? If I'm going back later and I'm looking at this, I'm like, okay, so there's my formula. All right, so it's looking at results B1. What's that? What are we looking at here? What if I could just put the name in there instead?
Oh.
So let's give this cell a name. Now, previously, when we've named ranges, we've had like a group of cells, like a column or something like that, right? We can do the same thing for a single cell. So let's call it min time. That cell is now called min time. So instead of having to put a cell reference over here and refer to it, let's just say min time. And it should give us the same result. Yep, exactly the same result. But now when I go back to look at my formula, I can actually understand what I'm looking at here, right? If this time is greater than min time, it's valid. Otherwise, put a blank. If this is greater than the minimum time, put a blank. So thinking ahead, let's do one more. Maybe we have kids that take too long on the test. And we've seen this. Like if you've used iReady or if you've used any kind of a diagnostic test, some kids are going to take an extraordinary amount of time. And there's one of two things that's happening usually. Either they're fooling around and doing something else, right? They do an answer and then they go to the bathroom and they come back and do another question and then they watch a YouTube video and then they go do another one and they take really too long. Some kids take too long because they're really struggling. They're just not sure how to approach the question. So those kids really haven't learned the information either. They're kind of trying to figure it out from scratch while they're taking the test. So it could be that we want kids who take too long also to be invalidated, right? Have you guys, I know Geraldine's used iReady. Have you all used iReady? Sandy or Perfilia? No?
No.
It's a lot of districts are using it for like a short cycle assessment or an ongoing diagnostic assessment, but whatever you're using. Some kids take too long. So let's say that there's a maximum limit also for a valid score. And for now, I'm just going to put in 70. And I'm going to give it a name also. So this will be max time. So right now, valid scores are greater than 40 and less than 70, right? Let's change this because right now, when we look at valid scores, we're only looking at one thing. We're only looking for students that are greater than the minimum time. But now we need to add a second condition. We want them to be greater than the minimum and less than the maximum. So we need to look for two things to determine if they're valid right now. It turns out it's pretty easy to do. We just have to make a very slight modification to that if-then statement, that if statement. So now we're going to look for two things. Let me pop over. I'm hoping Sandy comes back and really quickly here, but okay. Let's get rid of all that junk. All right. So right now we've got if, and we have something we check, right? Some kind of a condition. And then if yes, we do this. If yes, we do something. And if no, we do something else, right? And with this condition, we're only looking for one thing, but now we want to check for two things. So we can add something to this that says, you know what, there's not one condition to check for, there's two, and they both have to be true. And the formula name for that very simply is and. So we're going to have one, so both of these need to be true. We're going to have one condition here, first condition, comma, and another condition, second condition, and end it. So this statement can only be true. The whole statement can only be true if condition 1 and condition 2 are true. And all we're going to do very simply is we're going to take that whole thing right there, this whole thing, and we're going to drop it right there. Because we want to know, is this condition true? Well, this statement up here can only be true if both are true. If this one, the first one and the second one are true, then this right here becomes true. And if they're not both true, then it fails. So what does that actually look like? So we know, let me find a better space. All right, here we go. So now our statement is going to be a little bit different. All right, 30-second recap for Sandy. Okay. What we're trying to do is we have two conditions now. We've got a minimum time and a maximum time. Okay. We want to make sure both of those are true for the score to be considered valid. Okay. We want to be greater than the minimum and less than the maximum. So we've got another little piece that we can add here. Let me blow it up and let me move it. It's not, there we go. Called and. And what and does is it checks more than one. You can put a lot of things in here, but we're just going to use two. So this and is going to look at one condition, comma, a second condition. If both of those conditions are true, then the entire statement is true. Yes, this one and that one are true. If only one of them is true and the other one is false, then the overall statement is false. So basically, if both of those are true, the answer is yes, okay? And we're simply going to drop that into our formula down here. So if both of these are true, then the overall statement is true. So the condition is true, and we will do this. So it's going to look like this. Now, so what's our actual formula going to look like? Well, we've got our if, right? And we always do the parentheses. So we're going to say and then we have to have our parentheses because we have some parameters for and. Condition 1 is going to be time is greater than the minimum, which I cannot type, min, comma, and time is less than max. If both of those are true, if that's true and that's true, then the overall statement is true. So if they're both true, then we do this. Otherwise, we do that. Oops. So we've just taken it, that and statement, and we've dropped it inside of our if-then command. The difference is now we can check for two things. And they both have to be true for the overall statement to be true. So let's see what it looks like. Let's pop back over. Now that we've kind of walked our way through it. So we're going to change this a little bit. Now remember, we've got two ranges with names. We've got one called min time, and we've got one called max time, which is going to make this much, much easier. All right, so let's just get rid of all of this. Okay. So we're going to say if. And now we have to check for two things. So we're going to say and. And what does Google tell us? We need a logical expression. So if this value, 70, is greater than the min time, comma, because we're going to do another one now, logical expression 2, and this value is less than max time. So if both of those are true, comma, put in the word valid. And if not, just leave it blank. So now we're checking for two things. Let's see what happens. And I'm going to copy it down. We've only got 3 scores that are valid. So only 3 scores that meet both of those conditions. Well, let's see what happens. So we've got 3. Let's go back over here. Let's change these. Let's say the minimum time is back to 25. The maximum time will be at 70 again. Okay, we'll change them here. And now we'll update everything over here. And now we've got a bunch of valid scores that are within the frame that we have established. Clever, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't actually know the maximum number of conditions you can put within and. I suspect it's a lot. I have personally done it up to 6 or 7. But once you're getting that high, you're really in the weeds at that point and probably need to do something different anyway. But 2 is very common. Check for 2 things. So by simply adding the and statement in there, we can now check for both, and they both have to be true. Just for the sake of thoroughness, let me show you a way that we can modify that just a little bit more. So we talked about the and, okay? So, oops. Okay, so we talked about the and they both have to be true. There's another variation of this that's not called and, it's called or. So if the first one or the second one is true, then the overall statement is true. So either one of those will work. If it's and, they both have to be true. This one and that one are true. If it's or, then this one or that one have to be true for the overall statement to be true. So it could be and there, or it could be or. So we could have said or, and then we've got condition 1 or condition 2, either one, right? And if either one of those is true, this one or that one, then the overall statement is true. So a modification, we're not using that one.
I have a question. I noticed some of your formulas after the parentheses, you have a comma. Does that mean you're still thinking and still adding on to that formula? So that way you have so many, you have to make sure you add the commas.
Yes. Like in this one, we've got the and statement here, and it's got a parenthesis and it's got a comma after it, because that one right there, the and with its parentheses, that is one complete formula inside of there. That's the condition. But now we've got to get, so all of that is done. Now we've got to get back to the if statement. So all of that, and then our comma comes immediately after that. But every time you put it, if you put in a comma, it's going to say, all right, what's next? What are you trying to put in next? Basically.
You're not done. You're not done yet.
Right, exactly. Oh, I'm still sharing the other one. So like, oops, which one am I sharing? I want that one, share. What have I done? There we go. So like here, so it's if, and we've got our condition, right? We put in a comma to say, okay, there's something else that's required there. So now let's go to the next parameter. And we put, what do we do if it's true? Comma says, all right, we've finished that requirement. Now let's go to the next one, in which case would be that. Okay. So when you put the comma in, it's basically saying, okay, there's something else that's required, and I'm about to do it right here. So each of those parameters gets separated by a comma. And the nice thing is, share. When you put that comma in there, Google will kind of give you a clue, like what do you need to do next? Like I put a comma here and it tells me, oh, now I need to put in the value if it's false. So as soon as I do that, it advances the instructions also, and it tells me, all right, here's what you need to do. Okay. All right, so we have done everything that we did yesterday and more, just kind of refresh and expand. So let's actually look at a class set of data here. Okay, let's actually look at a sample class set of data. So this, and just as part of the setup, I've done some things that I thought might be useful. We'll see if they are or not. But I went ahead and named a bunch of ranges already. So every assignment, these are assignments up here by date. Every assignment already has a name. We've got a range already named for grades. We've got a range for whether or not the students are IEP students. We've got ranges already named for the test scores also. So I just set a bunch of stuff up just to save some time. So let's look at this. So we've got our kids over here. We've got grades over here, IEP status. We've got the scores on their assignments. We've got scores on tests over here. We even have an average, which I've already built in, just average everything all the way across. And I did that for all of them. Any type of analysis of student data, no matter how we're doing it, always begins with asking a question, something we want to know, right? And it's interesting, as I've worked with literally thousands of teachers over the years, I've heard so many times somebody says, well, I've got all the data. And then I ask, all right, well, what do you want to know from the data, right? Having the numbers is not evaluation. It's not analysis. That's all the raw stuff. The analysis is going to begin when you ask a question. What do you want to know? So, given that we have all of these data points here, we have all this information, what would you like to know? And let's see if we can figure out how to get your answer. Give me a question and we'll try to answer it.
How many students have below 60
On their total score over here?
on their, yeah.
All right, let's see. Did we have a named range for that? Because assuming if they're below 60, did they fail? Is that, or just
Mhm.
this is
Yeah.
okay. All right, so let's go to data. Let's see if I've got a range for that. I don't. What is grades? Oh, that's class grade. So we don't have a named range for that. So let's go ahead and create a named range for that column over here. Okay.
Yeah, that's one of the things the principals asked us.
Sure. So let's name this range. Let's add a range up here. And we're going to call this, what do you want to call this range?
Failing.
Failing scores.
Well, we're going to name the entire range, right? So, and within that range, there's going
Yeah.
to be some failing scores, right? So let's give a name that is applicable to the entire range. So what could we call it?
Below 60? I don't know.
Yeah, below 60.
A quick note with your names of ranges, they can have numbers in them, but they cannot start with numbers.
Okay.
Oh, and I've noticed that when you create named ranges, there's no spacing either.
That's correct. No spaces. You can
Okay.
do like
Okay.
an underscore if you want to imitate a space, but you can't put an actual space in there.
Oh,
Because when you put it into a formula, Google's going to think it's two different things. So if you want to cheat it a little bit, use an underscore or a dash or hyphen, but otherwise just mush it all together. So this over here, these are the averages of all the assignments and all the tests for each student. That's what we've got there. So you want to name this entire range below 60s? We can name
Yes.
it anything. Okay. Okay. So let's do that. So we want to just have Google Sheets count for us how many of those are actually below 60, right?
Mhm.
All right. So let's ask the question. I'm going to just stick it over here. How many scores below ... And in this case, we're looking for 60, right? So I'm going to, let's call this minimum score. And we're going to put a 60 in there. That's what we're looking for, right?
Mhm.
Let's give this cell a name also. And we've kind of already done it. So let's give it a color just so I know it's got a name. So let's just call it minimum score. Because we might also want to look how many are below 70, right? Or we might want to change that minimum score at a later time. So right now we've got a cell called minimum score, and the value of that cell is currently 60. All right. So let's find out how many of these are below 60. What is the name of the formula that we use for that? And it's the first one that we use today.
Perfilia had a question for you.
Okay, what's the question?
Yeah, I was wondering if you can export an Excel into Google, work with it, and then export it back into Excel?
Yes.
Okay.
And I will
Because yeah,
show you.
that does look easier than working with Excel directly.
Okay, let me actually, you know what? Since there's not many of us here, we'll take a moment and we'll do it. So let me share this. So you should be seeing my spreadsheet now. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Pause recording. Okay, I guess it's still recording. All right, so it's actually pretty simple. So over here on file, you can say import.
Mm-hmm.
and then upload, and you can drag your Excel spreadsheet into there.
Okay.
Which is actually what I did to create these, because these were originally Excel spreadsheets.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and what it's you just drag it in there and drop it, and it's going to ask you, do you want to create a new spreadsheet or do you want to replace the current one? So I just opened up a blank Google sheet, and then I said import it, import my Excel. It says, do you want to replace this one or create a new one? I said, just replace it,
Okay.
because it was empty. And then, so that's how you get in, and it'll convert it, cancel that. And if you want to send it back out to Excel, because it's going to change it into a Google sheet, right? Then you do, you say download, and you choose Microsoft Excel.
Okay.
Mhm.
And it'll keep all the changes made?
Everything. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. It even keeps your named ranges, which is kind of nice.
Okay.
Yep. So yeah, you can go back and forth between them. All right.
Okay.
All right. So we were trying to answer the question: how many were below the minimum score? So we've got a range called below 60, which is that whole group right there. We've got a cell named minimum score. And so we're going to be counting here, right? So what is the name of the formula that we use?
Um,
And it's the very first one we use today.
The very first one we used.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Count if.
Yes. Count, because all we want is the number of values, right? We don't want to know what's in them. We just, how many are there? So we're counting, and we're going to count them if they are at or above that minimum score. Or we wanted the ones below, right? That was
Yes,
how
for the
many are
one
below
below.
it. Okay. So count if. So what's the range where we're looking to do the counting?
60?
Would be, let's see,
Oh.
60 and below. 0, 60.
It was, you named the range below 60.
Uh-huh.
And what are we looking for? What's the criterion that we're looking for? This is how many are below the minimum score. So we're going to look in the range called below 60. And what are we looking for?
Grades? Or what was it called? That
Right
last
there.
column.
You've got it right up there.
Average grade? Was it?
Well, the range with the final grades,
Okay.
you called it below 60.
Minimum score. Oh, is that
Minimum
what it is?
score,
Yeah, okay.
which is that cell over there that we named, right?
Oh, okay.
See, I think the name below 60 is not quite accurate. I mean, you can call it whatever you want. It really doesn't matter. But it's not quite accurate, because what those really are the final scores, or the final averages. And within that, we're going to look for the ones that are below 60. But it kind of doesn't matter, just as long as you know what it means. 0. Now that can't be right. Or can it?
There's one at 58.4.
There sure is.
Maybe we used the wrong whatever you call it, the wrong ranges, I guess.
Well, you know what, actually? So this range called below 60 only goes down to 20. There's actually a few more scores down there. We need to change the range. We need to modify it, right? Because you see it doesn't pick up those last 3. Turns out it's really easy to do. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to hover on the right-hand side where I've got my list of ranges. If I hover over the one called below 60, I've got a little pencil next to it where I can edit or change or modify that range. So let's do that. And you see right now it goes from 04. So it goes from 4 down to 20.
It needs to be
Oh, yeah.
23.
It sure does. So let's just fix it. We just change it right there and say done. And now you see it's picked up those last ones also.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's helpful. But it doesn't really answer the question of if we're looking
No.
for below, why isn't that 58.4? There should be, the answer should be 1, right?
Mhm.
There's one score below 60. So let's go
Yeah.
back and take a look at it. So our minimum score is called 60.
Will it ignore, do the decimal points make a difference?
Shouldn't, because it's still,
Okay,
the minimum score is still the minimum score.
okay.
So below 60, and it's saying 0. Count if, so there's our range, and that's the criterion.
Do we need less than the
Yes,
minimum score?
yes, exactly. Because right now it's saying count it if it's equal to minimum score, right? And there aren't any that are
Okay.
exactly 60. It has to be less than the minimum score. That's the answer. So all we have to do is we need to change this to below minimum score, right?
Mhm.
Well, we could, and don't write this down yet, because I'm going to show you what seems to make intuitive sense, but it's wrong. Okay, so we could just say we want it to be less than the minimum score. But if you're using a greater than symbol or less than symbol, what it says is this value is less than this other value, right? We don't have the first value in there. We've only got part of that expression. And that makes things a little bit screwy for both Google Sheets and for Excel. So we have to tell it this is the entire expression. And there's a way to do that. I'll just tell you what it is. We put quotation marks around it.
Mm.
Because otherwise it's going to say, hey, we can say like 3 is less than symbol 4, right? We have values on both sides, but we don't have that here. And it's still 0. Let me just actually double check. That's the Excel version. Let me just double check. Okay, so I put in the actual value. It's going to do it. But I want to put in that number. And that gives me an error. Well, unfortunately, in this particular case, because we're using less than, there we go.
Oh.
It had to be one of a few things. All right. Now let's see what I did here.
So you added that letter, character N or N? Yeah.
So it's the less than symbol and the value.
Okay.
Now, if I had just put the number straight in there, then I put the whole thing in quotation marks. But the number in this case it's not going to be less than the word minimum score. It's going to be less than the value that's in minimum score. Whew. It's a little tricky. So we actually have to take the less than symbol and join it, merge it together with a name for a cell. It's a little bit screwy, but that's how it's done. So the less than symbol's got to be in the quotation marks and merge it. What the and does, it doesn't add them, it merges them together into a single expression. So we're going to merge together the less than symbol and the value of minimum score. We're going to merge it together into a single expression. Now it's going to work for us. Woof. Let me just actually just say we get a couple minutes. So let's say I've got Wilson. So I've got a last name Wilson. I've got a first name Bob. All right. Let me show you how that merging together works. Let's say I want to take these two names and I want to merge them together. Actually, let's call it Bob Wilson. Bob Wilson. First name, last name, right? How can we merge them together? So it's an equal because we're writing a formula. This is actually pretty common. So we want to merge several things together. We want to merge the last name, we want to add a comma, and we want to merge or add in the first name. And it turns out you can do this with Excel. So we're going to say equals. So what I want here is last name, comma, first name. So equals that value there. Now I'm going to merge something together with it. So I need my ampersand. What's going to be the next thing? Well, it's going to be the comma, and the comma is
E3.
text. So I'm going to put in the quotation marks, comma, space. And I'm going to merge that with this first name over here. So the ampersand doesn't add, it merges into a single expression.
Wow.
Did that make sense at all?
Yes, it does.
So we're taking E3, we're merging it with, and this is a text string here, right? It's text, it's comma, space, and then merge that with whatever's in D3, and now we've got Wilson Bob, which is actually how I made these over here in the first place. I went to random name generator on the internet, and I just randomly generate a bunch of first names, randomly generate a bunch of next names, and then I use that formula to merge them together into a single. Because I'm always leery about just coming up with a name and somebody's like, hey, that's my brother. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, your brother failed, so, or whatever. So I just randomly from, random name generator and mush them together. All right. So the point is, that's how merging works with that ampersand, and you can merge together values of cells with text and with other things. So we use that same technique to merge together the less than symbol with whatever's in this cell over here. And that way it actually worked. Now let's change it. Let's say the minimum, so we've got one that's below 60, right? What if we want to look at 70s? We only have to change it here. There's 4 of those below 70. See that? Or 80, or whatever we put there. There's 9 below 80, or 50, 0, 60, because we know the lowest one is 58 point something. Because it's always going to be coming back here to this value one time. And because we didn't actually put any specific numbers in here, we don't have to go back and change the formula at all. We just have to change this one named reference over here. Nifty, huh? All right, so that was your question. How do we figure that out? All right, so now we know how many scores are below 60. 1. What else might we want to know?
Another thing, I work with the after-school program, 21st Century, and we have to, at the end of each quarter, we collect the students' quarter grades, the letter grades, and we have to convert it to numbers. So sometimes, there's like A minus, A plus, A minus, and then same with each B plus, B minus. We convert those to numbers. So I used to try to take shortcuts using Excel, and the A minus, if it's worth 12, the B regular A is 11, A minus or A plus might be 12, regular A is 11, A minus will be 10. I couldn't get it to recognize the minus and the plus. So
there's a way to do that.
And I just ended up doing it. I ended up entering it manually.
Oh no, how many students do you have to do that with?
Plenty. No, 60.
Oh my. There's a way to do it. So you were actually going from letter grades to numbers as opposed to like a score to a letter grade. You're going the other way around.
Yes.
So there is a way to do that. Well, we don't have letter grades in here. Let's just pretend. So I'm just going to put in some grades here, okay? And we'll have a value later. So let's call this let's call this a B. Let's call this a B plus. Let's call this a C, D minus, something. All right, let me just put in some numbers because that's what you're starting with, right? You're starting with letter grades. Okay, so let me just create some letter grades. B minus, B, F plus, C, B minus, B minus, B, D plus. Oops. I'm just sort of making a stab at what they might be. C, let's call that a C plus. Oops, C plus, B minus, and D plus. Okay, that's what you're starting with right there. All right, let me shrink this down a little bit to 140. Can we see them all now? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Okay. So what you use is a very valuable formula, which if we had much longer was actually on my official list of things to do, but you're asking the question, so let's do it. There's many times when you want to look at some kind of a value and you want to then replace it or pick up a different value that's related to it. Like you want to look at a grade letter and you want to convert it to a number. So there's a way to do that. And it's something called vertical lookup or V lookup. And before I actually show the formula, let me show you how it works, because it personally I use it a lot. I think it's very, very valuable, but it can be conceptually a little bit weird. So let's say you've got letter grades over here. Let's put in a D. No, let's okay. Let's put in. Where's my brush? Let's put in F, D, C, B, and A. And, D minus, D plus, D, whatever, whatever the values are over here, right? So these are our grades. And this is going to be the numerical equivalent. All right. So let's call this 0 and, whatever you use, just whatever. But for example, let's call this 1, 2, 3, and 4 points. Okay. So the way V lookup or vertical lookup works is it says, okay, let's look down this vertical range right here. And if we find the value that we're looking for, replace it with the equivalent value over here, right? So we're going to look at this, and if we find it, what I want to have come back to me, the result of the formula should be the one over here. If I find this, I want it to return this over here. So for example, if you have a list of students and you have their grades, you can say, hey, look up the student's name and then tell me what grade he's in. Or look up the student's name and tell me if he's IEP or not. So we can set up some columns like this with the information. Then all we have to do is say, okay, go look in the first one. If you find the value, the same value, give me the second one. Okay. 357. Are you, this is going to take a couple of extra minutes. Are you okay hanging out for a couple extra minutes to do this?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hang around.
All right, because this is gonna take a couple minutes just to actually set it up. So what we need to do is we need something that looks like, let me grab another, something that looks like this right here. Okay, some array of more than one row, more than one column. And we're going to tell Google Sheets, look in this array, find the value in the first column, but give me back the value in the second column. All right, let's set it up. Let's set it up. You know, I'm actually going to make it easier on myself. I'm not going to do the pluses and minuses. Okay, I'm just going to just D, because otherwise we've got to put a lot more rows in there and stuff like that, which I'm not. It may not be worth the time doing that. B
equal
D C B and D. Okay. All right. So we've got D, E, F, and B. All right. And that was a D. All right. So let's come over here to our other sheet. Let's create that array. So here we've got the grade, and here we have the value. All right. So we are going to put, so what's the highest? Let's see. So F. All right. Yeah, okay, this will work. D, C, B, A. And we're going to call this 0 points 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so if it finds the letter score over here, it's going to give me this over here. Okay. You can add extra rows. You could have, you know, the D minus row and the D plus row and the C minus and the C plus, just however many you need here, right? Okay, but you're basically going to put all the possible values over here, and you're going to have their equivalency over here. All right. So now that we have that set up, it actually starts to become pretty easy. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to select this entire array here with the first column and all the potential values. And I did this once when I was looking at, I was actually doing a health program looking at BMI records, and we had to know girls, and then here's all the ages, and then here are all the weight ranges. No, all the weight ranges down one side and like 20 columns across for all of their ages. And then I had to say, okay, find the where they are in the weight range over here, and then go over however many rows. So, you know, in that case, it was up to 20, but you can go hundreds if you needed to. In this case, it's simple. It's only 2, but you could have a lot more columns going across. All right. So let's give this a name.
Plus and minus.
Plus or minus, like D plus D minus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we could do that just for the, you know, for the sake of time.
Mm-hmm.
Just to make it simple. I'm not gonna worry, just to demonstrate how it works here. Okay, so we're gonna call this let's call it grade values. Look up the grade, give me the value. So I'm going to call that range grade values. Okay, so where is it? Right there. All right, so we've got a range here called grade values. First column is the grade, the second column is the value. Okay, so let's come back over here. So I put in some grades, and I took off all the pluses and minuses just to make it easy. So this is the way the formula is going to work. And it's pretty simple. We only have to tell it a few things, fortunately. Get rid of all of that. Okay, so the way VLOOKUP works, the name is, let me get a better color, VLOOKUP, vertical lookup. The first parameter is, what is the name of the array? And we're not calling it just a range here, but an array, because it's multiple rows and multiple columns, but you know, range, array, either way. So we're looking up at the array. And now what are we looking for? What are we trying to find? The next thing is, what column do I return? Column to returned. Where, you know, we find it in the first column, how far over do we look to do it? The last one is generally going to be the word false. And it can be either true or false, the last one. True means that the list is sorted. We're going to do that for numerical. If we're looking at numerical values, it'll find that it'll find the row, it'll find the last row that is not greater than the value we're trying to find. That only works if they're sorted numerically. But if we're looking for the point is this, so don't worry about that. The point is, if we're looking for exact matches, then we need to use the word false. So false will say, look for an exact match, basically. All right, so that's what we're looking for. It's only 4 things to include. So, so let's do it. Equals V lookup. Oh, I just learned something. Google Sheets does it backwards. So it's asking us, what are we looking for first? Okay, so my formula was actually backwards for those first 2, and I apologize for that. So it's saying search key. What are we looking for? We are looking for that. So I'm going to just click on it. Now, where are we looking? The range is called grade value. That's what we named it, right? Index means, all right, what column do you want me to return? So the first two parameters are backwards. So what are we looking for? Where are we looking for it? And it's only going to look in the first column. Now, if it finds it, which column within that array or within that range should be returned? And it's 2. So whatever, find it in column 1, give me the value in column 2. And because we're looking for an exact match, false. So that should give us the value, what is that going to be, 3? If we've done it correctly, 3.
Yeah.
Sure enough.
Okay.
And I'll just copy it down. And there are your values.
Oh, wow.
I'm guessing that that's much easier than doing it manually.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, much easier, much faster.
That's why I love spreadsheets.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, so I actually did it backwards on my little description. So, but Google set me straight, fortunately. So what it should have been, just for the sake of your notes, we're going to do these backwards. So it's, what are we looking for? And what's the range where we're looking for it? Okay. Comma, then what, if it finds it, it's only going to look in column 1. Now there's a much fancier way, which is, to be honest, more than we need to do. If you set up the array correctly with your values in the first column, VLOOKUP will only look for the value in column number 1. So you have to kind of think about how you're setting it up, right? But if it finds it in column 1, then how far out in the range? Now, our range only has 2 columns in it. If I had said column 3, it's going to give me an error because there is no column 3 in that range. So you have to be careful, right? We have 2 columns, so the most that return would be 2. And then false because we're looking for an exact match. So once we set up our little thing like that, it became pretty easy, There's our range.
Yeah, I can try that.
Yeah, we just set it up. But the way to make it easy though is once you've got your little matrix set up here, select it all and give it a name. Because it just makes it a lot easier. Now I could have written sheet 2 K3 through sheet 2 L7. That's more work than I want to do. Right? So I gave it a name. So we just look in. So we're looking for, in this case, we're looking for P4. Where are we looking? We're looking in the range called grade value. What do you want to be returned to you? Column 2. and false because we're looking for an exact match. So you would just set up your array with all the pluses and minuses, you know, on your first column, and then whatever the value is, you'll do it in your second column, and then vertical lookup will skim through there, find your grade. It'll give you the next column over, which is your value, and it's done. And then you just copy the formula down, and it's done.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, I'll try that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's how I would do it, because just even the thought of going through line by line by line and doing it manually just kind of scares me. And the nice thing is, what if?
Yeah, there's the time.
Yeah, a lot of time when you can do this in seconds. But what if you decide later you wanted to change the values? Maybe an A+ is no longer worth 11 points. Maybe it's worth 12 points. You would have to go back through all of those manually again to do that, right? But if you do it this way, you only have to change them one time here. Let's say I want these to be equal to 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9, right? I change them there, and notice it's going to update it here.
Oh, yeah.
Without having to go back and doing it manually, because there's just no reason to. Nobody's got time for that, really, you know. And you're probably thinking, wow, this is totally below my pay grade, right? Click, click, click. So there's a better way to do it. Well, we're actually at 4:09 right now. I tell you, this question of yours is going to make this video a lot more interesting. So thank you for that. But you know, if you want to, if you've got another question like the last one, I'm willing to hang out for a little bit longer. I've got a little bit more time. If there's something like, hey, I really want to know how to do blank, now is the time to ask it.
That was the only question I had that I had in mind to the grades. I don't know about Sandy. She's still there?
Sandy looks like she's
And I don't know what I would ask.
Okay.
Oh, no.
But you know,
I don't know what I would ask. I'm
Yeah.
not in 21st century, so I don't have good questions to ask.
or from this data. But you know, if we're looking at this data, we've got names, grades, IEPs, and a bunch of scores, right? The things that we have done so far: average if, count if, vertical lookup, name cells, all of that, if-then statements with ands for multiple conditions. That's going to get you to almost any question that you can ask. Those very simple things. I mean, obviously there's a lot more stuff that Excel can do. And if we had a semester to do it, there's a lot more that we would do. But those few simple formulas, those few simple techniques are going to enable you to pull an enormous amount of information out of data. So we can start looking at just a mess of numbers and actually turn it into something that we can make use of. So those, they're pretty simple, they're pretty low level, but they're really useful and really powerful. So hopefully this will be useful to you. A good weekend. Stay safe out there, and I hope you have a really nice Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Okay,
Same to
thank
you.
you.
All righty. Have a good day.